handles. Twitter.com/BulkMatrix over there sets up another camera. YouTube.com/BulkMatrix as well. We don't have real names. Since 2017. I'm Twitter.com/Vangelist.
And I'm Twitter.com/diecast2.
If you need a human name, my name is Chris.
And I'm Andrew.
Yes. You can call us any of those things if you want. Chris and Andrew have less syllables, might be easier. This is the fan media panel, which currently has a video review tilt to it. Originally, if you go back on YouTube and watch some of the older fan media panels, we had other media types involved, and it was mostly a long slideshow presentation. This seemed a little more fun. I've done this a couple times now. It's a little more energetic. We're going to have you guys get involved, by the way. That's why there's a mic up there. The crux of your involvement is we're going to make a video review together. And it's going to be based a little bit on my process, which is a little selfish.
No, that's awesome.
But the way I do it is I have it in segments, which is usually for a transformer, one that might be packaged in robot mode. Intro.
Well, to be fair, it really wasn't packaged.
It was professionally bagged in robot mode. So the segments would usually be intro, robot mode, which is kind of focusing on the paint, the sculpt, and the accessories, then articulation, then transformation, then alt mode, which is paint, sculpt again, and then overall thoughts. So for each of those segments, I'm going to ask you, the crowd, whoever wants to, you don't all have to, just be nice if someone does, to think up one sentence about that topic, and you've got 15 seconds once you're at the mic to drop that sentence. I came up with 15 seconds because normal people seem to take that long to say one sentence. I usually need about 40 to 70 seconds to say a sentence, because I usually start commaing everything together.
One sentence.
Yeah, it just continues and continues. The sentences I say, they just don't stop. I can keep going on, adding more thoughts to them, filling in lots of garbage words while I make lots of filler time for people who might be setting up cameras or other such things. Camera's ready. All right. So before we begin that bit, and while I get up to go do that bit, Andrew, how long have you been doing video stuff?
Probably about 2 years now.
Cool. So yeah, I started on YouTube. I signed up on YouTube in 2006 to watch television shows that were pirated, and then in 2008 I started making videos there. And then 3 years in, I went to film school, which usually is an embarrassing thing for people, but I had a good time, and my debts all paid off, so I have no ill will. It was because of doing YouTube stuff that I wanted to learn some more, and then I really wanted to share whatever it is I still remember from school, and remember as many people as I could. So to get going, usually I have a jacket on here because it's kind of chilly. When you're doing work, you gotta just take it off. Take it all off. Now this isn't gonna be fully accurate to how I work at home, because usually I'm just not wearing clothes. Who wears clothes at home? Right? Nobody.
I got a good story. It's kind of inside baseball. It's not something I tell a lot of people, but how I got into reviewing figures is I've watched reviews for a long time, obviously, being in the fandom and doing the podcast. I was aware of them and enjoyed them, and it was always something I wanted to try, but I felt like the space was pretty crowded, and there was, very experienced, very good reviewers, like evangelists that have already been doing it, so long that I didn't feel like it's a hard market to actually break into and do and be popular and good at it. And before the Daka Toys Chronos came out, the designer said, I want you to do a review because I want someone who is known in the fandom but doesn't necessarily do reviews. And I was like, well, that's great. I've been wanting to do reviews. So it just worked out perfect. So I started testing figures to review them and getting ready to do this big review, and then it never came. And then it was a really bad figure. So I actually recently just burned it to the ground and put it up on YouTube. So that is available, and that's one of the reasons, other than it's a horrible figure, and I wouldn't want to sell that to anyone, because they're just all have problems. But I really wanted to like the figure because I feel like it was it was helping me break into something that I wanted to do anyway. But when that all fell through, I had already put some investment in it, so I'm like, I'm just gonna do it.
Would you say that that is the ending of your first story arc? Like your origin was this Docket Toys thing?
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
now that you have literally destroyed it, and you're ready to move on to arc number 2, the tournament arc. That's an anime joke.
I've gone to G2.
Damn. I'm gonna move the mic over slightly. So it picks up some more sound. We've got a whole bunch of equipment here, and I'll briefly explain some of it. This mic is the one I always use. It's called a Zoom H4n. It's one that is very common because it's now pretty old and you can get them used pretty cheap. It's got a big mic on the top, condenser mic that picks up really nice sound, and it's got 2 inputs here on the butt, which is the professional term for the posterior. And you can put XLR things in, you can put minis in, you can put quarter jacks in. So basically you can run 3 microphones at once off 2 AA batteries. I got a power adapter for it because I forgot to charge all of my AA batteries. But it's a nice piece. There are things like Tascam and other companies now which are comparable. There's the Zoom H6 now, which I think Yoshi has one, and Jeremy has one, both from Transmissions. There's one in YouTube Space in Toronto. It's a really nice piece of tech. I want one! That's going to be doing most of our audio today. However, you might notice we have a camera there and a camera there. Those aren't just for extra footage, because those cameras have mics on them too. And if there's one thing that's really important that I don't do enough, it's to have redundancies. So if you have 2 not as good audio channels running, and then this really good one that's sort of directional, anything this one doesn't pick up, those ones will. If this one fails, we have 2 more. If one of those failed, then the redundancy failed, and who cares? It's redundant. As for lighting, this is less of a you should get this and more of a this is what I have right now. Because these things I actually got for my birthday from my mom. I have LED lights now because I got tired of how normal lights get hot and it got really annoying. So LED lights don't get as hot. And then we've got a mounting thing here. This is a super clamp and an articulated arm, both by Manfrotto. I used to have my lights on little tripods, and they would always bump me, or I would knock them over. And it was getting more and more frustrating. So I learned about these, and now I'm using these, and they're great! They're not cheap, but they're great, and you can use them for lots of things, like not just lights. If you have like fancier stuff, you can get like stronger ones. You can put a camera on, you can put a mic on them. It's wonderful. I just realized the outlets are all over there, so I'm going to do some shuffling. In the meantime, I'll show you guys what figure we're talking about today, even though most of you saw it. We're going to do the open and play. Does he have a name?
And knock out
Big Cannon. Yeah, that's right. Big
Open
Cannon.
and play Big Cannon, known in some territories as Glavitron. Originally I wanted to do something small like I did in Toronto, because for these panels I like to do something that's simple. But hey, this guy's also simple and he's big, and we don't have the feed like in Toronto, so you can still see him, hopefully. I'm going to get this other light set up, and I'm going to see if I can move this power over.
And while he's doing that, I'll reinforce the lighting thing if this is something you ever want to do or try. With photos and video, it's the most important thing. It's also the thing I struggle with the most because I'm never happy with it, and I keep adjusting, I change my backgrounds, which really isn't probably that good. You should probably have one set of backgrounds consistent throughout all your videos, but I'm still in the fine-tuning phase.
Can I come up and get a quick tip?
You can. That's Vault Matrix. He also does lots of videos.
Hi, everybody.
Truth be told, you can hang out up here if you want.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. So, one thing that I've discovered is Target and Home Depot are your friend. So, for the cost of about $40 at between Target and Home Depot, you can get clamp lights that are just standard, everyday desk lights that have little clamps that clamp on the edge of desks. You get those at Target. They're about $12 to $20 a pop, depending on what's on sale or the color. For some reason, red is $10 more. And then at Home Depot, get 5500K lumen lights. They're compact fluorescent lights, and they're $15 for a box of 4. So you get a couple of those, you're out maybe 50 bucks, you've got your lighting. Then for a backdrop, you can use a bed sheet. If you're just getting started, just a very gentle, dark color or lightish color bed sheet, as long as it's not high weave. I know that sounds really weird, but a high weave reflects light. As opposed to the lesser weaves, they'll actually absorb the light, and you won't have light bouncing around, and your white balance and all that fun stuff will be thrown off. So you can get started for super cheap. The audio stuff, that gets a little bit more expensive, but you can get started with lighting and just a little box setup for yourself very cheaply.
For audio, if you do have like about $100 budget for tech toys and fun, the smaller version of the Zoom or its competitors, which is called the Zoom H1, which is just this mic here and none of these inputs. That thing is usually about $100 and often goes on sale. And you might have seen before we did this clap thing. If you're cool with, in editing, taking an audio track and adding it to the video track, you just do a clap to have a synchronization point, you can get really good audio for like $100. And it is like probably the only audio you're gonna need for toy reviews. So between that and like $50 for lights, if you want to spend money, you only have to spend like $150 to really get going. And if you don't want to spend money, get all the desk lamps you have in your house. Just find ones that match up really well. Point two at something, get your phone out, film on that, your phone will pick up your voice, and get going with that. Like you can get going for free. Your first step up for production is like $50 to $150 tops. You don't need a fancy camera. All the stuff that this lighting and audio stuff we're talking about, you can still do with your smartphone. The last thing you need to buy is a fancy camera. It's really important to say that. I think there's a lot of people I talk to who want to have the conversation about how do I get going doing video stuff online. The first thing they say is, what camera should I get? And it's like, that's really the last thing you should think about if you haven't made anything yet. Because I think one of the best ways to put pressure on yourself and to put yourself off of wanting to do creative things is to also have this huge monetary sink in there already before you've even tried it. Because then you're going to feel like, well, now I have to make something worthy of this equipment that I got. And it's mostly ways to not get anything done, for the most part. So I've got these things clamped on here, and I'm also very proud of all of you for not yelling Futurama jokes. Because the moment I talked about my clamps on Twitter, I just got GIFs, tons of GIFs. There's a robot in Futurama you see who has clamps. He says, I'm going to...
And what's his name?
Steve. I actually don't remember his name. I watched all the Futurama on Netflix, and I forgot most of it. And that was like in the last 2 years. So I've tied myself in here so I can't leave. And take a sip of water. Before we go, actually, you were telling me about this cheer wine.
Yeah, it's available in like around North Carolina area, but it's really good. It's like a cherry drink, I guess.
All right. Well, if you do want to get in the business, you got to learn branding as well. So when you're taking a drink of something that is completely innocent, but also to make you some money, make sure you're facing parallel to the camera. Label out. One pinky up if you want to be fancy. And
Shill.
What, Coke Zero stop paying the bills?
oh no, it's right here.
Yeah, there it is.
This is a Canadian one, by the way. It still tastes like the old Coke Zero. We just added the word sugar. You see, like it looks the same, but they did add the word sugar and sucra to the bottom. It like tastes vaguely different, but I tried your guys' and I don't know what you all are doing.
That's okay.
I think we're also cranky.
If I could too, foam board is a really cheap way of making flat and backgrounds too, and
Foam board is your friend.
matte foam board even better.
Yeah, I have some. It's because you get it in white. White foam board is also a great light bouncer. Say you have these lights and they're super bright, and say you don't have any room, so this light would be right here. That's no good. So turn the light away, put the foam board here, bounce that light onto the figure, and it's a lot softer. And then if you take the foam board, take the other side, put some just black tape on it, or get some of that fancy like black aluminum foil or something, then you have the opposite effect. You'll have something that can block light or soak it in. So if you want to say not have this light bleeding out this way, you can bolt some of those things on here. I have like 7 sheets of foam board to do all that I've had for about 4 months, but I haven't started yet because I'm busy.
I have foam board, and then my son got a hold of it. I don't have foam board.
Foam board is hard for a base though, because if you're going to continually use it, it's going to get marked up, and then it's going to show in every video. So
Foam board is a little bit more of a, as it was described to me at a seminar I went to, foam board's the stuff you get to use where you don't care what happens to it. Because it's cheap, so you can just like slice it up and go like, I'm going to make a light box, and cut it the wrong shape.
Yeah, but it's a perfect suggestion, especially when you're starting out, because you can always, if you really, really need to, you could just get some black matte spray paint the foam board black, or a color that you would prefer, especially if you're looking for a super cheap green screen. Get foam board, a couple pieces of foam board, get the correct chroma key for whatever the green screen is, get that in Home Depot again, and just gentle spray paint, do a couple coats, and you've got yourself a homemade green screen.
So usually, I got the lights ready. These are the 2 front-facing lights I usually use. Often I also have 2 smaller lights back here. They're also LEDs because I found them on sale, and I don't like heat. And what they do, these 2 lights fill the front of the figure. The 2 lights I usually have here and here would then light the edges of the figure a little bit more harshly. This makes for a nicer looking picture. Since we're doing this as a panel, I'm sure that the eventual audience will forgive us or not leave lots of comments.
I just think it's something with Canadians, since you don't like heat. It's hotter,
The problem is, Toronto as a city, when it's not the winter, we just had a 4-day heat warning, which was fun. My wall was actually emanating enough heat that I thought the building turned the heat on. And I was crawling around on the floor, touching all the heating vents, going like, did you? Because this is usually the time of year when they turn the heat on, because it's September, October. So I was about to make an angry letter and say, you all are cruel people. So this guy doesn't have packaging, and truth be told, one of the first things I usually film is the packaging entirely for the intro B-roll. We don't have to worry about an intro here because we're all friends. But often an intro to a video is helpful in getting a lot of the simple information out of the way. What this toy is, maybe if it was given to you as a sample, like where it came from, if you have a little joke to throw in or something, you just want to get out of the way before you even start talking about it. And then I find that doing that, I end up taking about 30 seconds most of the time, so I'll usually get about 30 seconds of B-roll of the packaging from front and back just as visual filler. I don't actually like reviewing packaging that much, unless it's really fancy. But then I try to blow through it kind of fast. I get tired of boxes. It's usually going to get thrown in the garbage. But since I always want to film B-roll of it, I end up with this stack of packaging where I'm like, well, I need to film it all first before I throw it out. And then it's sitting there for 8 months.
I have that same problem.
You can make a lot of work for yourself if you start overthinking things. But overthinking things can also be very fruitful. So, you got to figure out what kind of person you are. I also have a very bad work ethic. It's part of the problem. So we're going to get going with the robot mode here. And for the robot mode B-roll, usually I film the figure just sort of standing neutral, front and back, and I'll do some close-up shots. So I'll do those now. I've tilted this table at an angle, so hopefully you can kind of see what I'm doing. Like I said, we don't have a live camera feed, just the limitations of the room. But I guess, trust me that I'm filming the toy. While I'm doing this, what do you guys usually do when you want to just show some of the basic stuff? Like, you guys often do the camera here, hands around thing. So did you have to get used to your autofocus and stuff, or do you lock focus?
It's hard because you actually have to pay attention to the screen at the same time you're trying to pay attention to the figure, which is a limitation in how I do the review. So I have to keep checking the screen, and if you ever notice when you watch certain reviewers, myself included, sometimes it goes off camera, and that's just because we're forgetting to look at the screen and we're focusing more on the figure. So there's definitely a limitation when you're doing it that way.
So my rig is actually right there. That camera setup is my rig, except with the microphone turned around, pointing back towards me. The desk I'm using is a little bit smaller than this, so I'm often like this and looking down at the viewfinder as I'm doing it. So one of the things that I'm actually saving up for right now is a display, what's called a display monitor, and it'll sit on the shoe that the microphone is plugged into. The thing on the top of the camera is called an accessory shoe. It is a actual screen that does 1080p video, because I film in 1080p 60. So I will be watching the screen and not paying attention to the figure, but seeing everything in front of me, destroying my eyes in the process.
It's something that I think is worth thinking about when you watch a video review and maybe you're not liking what you see, or it's like someone trying it out for the first time, or it's just a reviewer you're like and they're starting to sound a little bit tired, things are getting sloppy. Having done a lot of like, and I still do it for the articulation segments, like the camera in front of you, hands around front, it's kind of hard to think in that many directions of like, I need to start talking and keep the thing in shot, manipulate the things correctly without actually like dropping the figure or breaking something off. Watch the focus now that I've moved the thing, or especially if you're transforming the thing and talking at the same time, unless you're describing what's happening, and I think that's why a lot of us end up describing what's happening. That becomes your vocal autopilot that kind of keeps you in line while you're doing stuff. That's partly why I moved into doing like footage and audio separately for a lot of the review. Is it made it less pressure for me, and whether or not you do that stuff separately, doing things in segments also means you have breakpoints. It's like I know you often like go like we're gonna cut away here for a sec, cut back. And being able to do that means that if something goes wrong, you don't have to start over. Like I've done it many times. I've always heard people talk about like, is this the third take I'm doing? FYI. Anyway, if I sound a little bit tired or impatient it's because I've said all this 4 times.
So to that point, one thing that I learned a long time ago in doing this, and not only this, but podcasting, is stop. Just stop. Get up, get a drink of water, go to the bathroom, walk away, pet a dog, roll a bone, hug your son, hug your daughter. Just stop, walk away, center yourself. Because what a lot of people don't realize is this is actually a lot harder than you think. People are going, oh well, why are you doing this? Why did you miss this? You should know that this figure is related to this.
Why did you stumble over your words?
Exactly. This figure is related to this guy over here who nobody but me has ever heard of, and these random forum members. Okay, I'm one person and I don't have TFwiki in my head. And when people start sitting down and actually doing this, I've had a lot of people, especially a couple of other YouTubers, say, "Oh, you, what's the word? No, not screwed up, but you got me into doing this. It's your fault."
I like how we all defaulted to something horrible and negative. 2017.
Oh, what a year. But a lot of folks have said, you got me into doing this, and now I understand what you go through to do a review. One thing that people don't understand is for every 10 minutes of video, it's an hour to an hour and a half, 2 hours worth of work. And that is recording, that is
Editing.
also editing, exporting, and color correction. So a lot of folks don't realize there are multiple parts. Now, Evangelist, and I believe you as well, shoot B-roll. I don't shoot a lot of B-roll. I will shoot a little segment, stop and think, okay, was that good enough? Do I need to do a second take? Do I need to do a third take? And then edit it down. And the reason I do that is because of the nature of the way I am. I am a very step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. I'm effectively a computer engineer in my day job. So that's how I have to think. And that's how I've been trained to think over the years. So,
Dumb question, what's B-roll?
B-roll is any footage that you shoot that is not sequential to the rest of the video. So, an example would be, say Evangelist is shooting the transformation. He has got the transformation in a sequential order in the video, but there's an audio over it. So he has taken all these extra bits of B-roll, combined them and edited them together into a section of A-roll, and then exported that into his full video. So
Like the stuff I was just filming
Yes.
Is what you call B-roll, because like that was all like just footage of the figure from various angles to highlight a few specific things I'll tell you guys about for your information for this bit we're going to get you taught. And that stuff is called B-roll because I'm then taking from that whatever I think works while I have the audio lined up underneath it, place it down over it. I try to get that stuff to line up as best I can with what I'm saying. And I think we should just quickly run you through some things about this figure. Quickly though, does anyone here actually have this figure? Did anyone buy this in the dealer room? Just him?
It actually did sell out, so I'm sure there were a lot of people.
Available not now! Sorry.
They do have a bunch more. I was just in the dealer room before coming over here, so they do have
I found more.
Yeah, they found some more in a desert block or somewhere.
So here's the things to know about this, and if you are in the back and you have trouble seeing, like, feel free to come up closer. We got the mic closer to the front as well, so that we're all going to be a lot closer together, and also so I can just turn this mic around and hear you instead of go all the way over there. So this is a Galvatron. He's $50. He is very much modified, upscaled knockoff of the Titan's Return Galvatron, which is a lot different from Open in Place first release, which is a fully original design Springer. This guy has a lot of tweaks. He has no jet mode, he has no headmaster, but we'll talk about that later. For his robot mode, the main things to know are he's big, he's like leader class. He has a finish you can probably see in person here, which looks a lot better than those photos that came out of him to show off when he wasn't first. And his head sculpt, if you can get a good look at it, is I think it's a pretty okay, slightly toyish, slightly cartoonish Galvatron. You can walk around.
I think it's an improvement over their last Open and Play, the Springer, because that face sculpt was the weakest part of that figure. So the other thing that's worth noting on this figure is we don't know the actual retail price. Since there was no packaging and stuff, it could easily be $80 when you go and try and get it from a retailer by the time it's packaged.
I would be amazed though if it's over $65, because I think that part of what makes their Springer work is its price, and what makes this thing palatable to me is the fact that it's less than the Springer. The other thing to note is, you know how Galvatron has that purple thing on his back sticking up? You can see it on that figure. I filmed some footage of this. You can actually fold that purple thing down. It's got enough hinges on it specifically to allow it to fold down against his back in a variety of positions if you want it out of the way, or if you want to free up his waist joint. But we're not talking about articulation yet, we're just talking about the paint and sculpt of the robot mode. His arm cannon is on the side of his arm now, which there's like a shapeways part you need to do that on the original Titan's Return Megatron. And one important thing to note, the way this thing pegs in is it's a hexagonal peg, so you cannot twist it in the peg hole, because the peg hole is also a hexagonal socket. So it just locks in one way, and if you want to put it in at another angle, you gotta pull it out and stick it in this way, and then that just looks silly. The giant purple space robot with a literal crown built into his head isn't silly until his cannon's pointing at an awkward angle. So, if you could think up for me, whoever would like to, one sentence about this Galvatron in his robot mode. Head on up to the microphone, just drop your thoughts. Even if you're kind of echoing something we said, just go for it, because I'd rather use your audio for the video that we make than ours. No offense. And just think about, do you think this actually looks like a decent Galvatron for the size? Do you think the size works? Do you like the purple that he is? If you got to look at his head sculpt, if you want to run up and take another look at it, but do you think that the head sculpt looks Galvatron to you, or do you think maybe it looks a little bit... It was in that weird robot lift thing. And yeah, anyone have any thoughts, or do you just want to... There we go. You might be the robot mode section. No, you're not. Never mind.
Yeah, it's awesome figure for the price. I mean, $50 for that is amazing, considering that it looks pretty dang good.
So this figure solves all the problems I had with the Minor Wars figure of having a crappy crown, and now he has his shoulder cannon on his side of his shoulder. So no change ways, customizing, don't wait like 2 weeks for that to come. So all in one figure, good.
Yeah, it's worth noting the crown is almost pointedly larger. And it's not a flip-up mask, so you can actually make it look like a Galvatron head when you're not looking at it just from the front-facing angle.
I was going to say the paint work is really well done. I don't see a lot of sloppiness to it. Interesting how the purple seems to be almost a satin color versus a lot of other Galvatrons where it's more sort of a gloss or even metallic. but it's also kind of a nice contrast with the silver part as well.
Cool, thanks very much. That is some robot mode content. Now what we're going to do is the articulation, which I usually do, sitting behind the camera improv style. What I was thinking is, does one of you want to join me over there and we can each be a hand? Okay, your left hand, I'm right hand. This is going to go great.
Have you ever seen two people transform a figure in one video?
I think if we try to do the transformation like this, we're going to run into what panel's after us? They're gonna
IDW.
Oh, they'll be fine with it.
They'll just kill off another character while we're waiting.
Don't give James any ideas.
That's a nice looking Galvatron you got there. It'd be shame if something oh.
Never mind.
All right.
Too late, Chris.
So usually I'd have a mic here to catch the audio. We'll just roll with this as we are. Point it in our direction at least. I don't think the cable's gonna get over there.
Someone repro labeled it already.
Oh yeah, I should mention I borrowed this figure from my friend Joe Ichabod. If you see a man with a large purple mohawk, yell at him, "Thanks for lending Chris the figure for the fan media panel, Joe." It'd be great if he tells me that he was just hearing a wall of noise while he was walking around. All right, I'll get this recording, and I'll lock the focus as well. All right, here we go. Articulation on this guy. The head is able to swivel left and right, and it's got one of those dedicated hinges to look up and down, so it's not a ball socket joint. If my left hand could come in here for a second and give it a quick tilt, so you can't get it to go left and right on this kind of angle. It's just not working. It's not working. As for his shoulders, I think I'll reach in with the left hand and move the arm forward and backwards. It's got a ratchet joint for that axis of motion, and a slightly softer ratchet joint for that outward axis of motion. And then while he's doing that, I'm going to simultaneously with my other hand bend the elbow, show you there's a double jointed elbow, partly for the transformation, but it means you can get a decent curl. And then these wrists, they can swivel, and these fingers can open and close. The hands are a little bit tiny when you close them up into a fist, like almost comically tiny. But if you open them up, I think it looks a little bit better. And then the index finger has a mid hinge in the center of the finger, so you can get him to slightly convincingly point when compared to figures who point with their finger hooked like this, which is just a bummer. They're not pointing. They're just pushing their knuckle at somebody. Rude. Now, this guy has a waist joint for his transformation, but if I hold down here and twist up there, it's not going. It's just not going. You've got to swing this around, and then unseat this thing. This thing tabs into his back. So you got to actually do this optional step of holding this up against his back so that it's not sticking up over the back of his head. But now that that's there, if I reach over my left hand